from Microbe TV, this is TWiP, This Week in Parasitism, episode number 99. Hi everybody, I'm Vincent Racaniello, and today is December 2nd, 2015. Joining me here in studio is Dickson Despommier.
Hello, Vincent.
And Daniel Griffin.
Hello. What is this Microbe TV? I don't think I knew about this.
We have noises in the hall, don't we?
We do. That's okay. We can talk about it.
I will answer your question. I just want to tell our listeners that a new person is moving into the floor, and heavy equipment is being moved past the door. So if you hear noise, I'm very sorry. There's nothing I can do about it.
They're a virologist. This is good stuff.
The virologist who has never said a word to me or any of my colleagues. But that's another story.
But she will.
Yes, of course she will.
I doubt it. I will bet you that the new person will not come into my office to establish greetings. I bet that the new person will wait till I go into the new person's office. But we'll see. I'm not petty. Microbe TV is the name of a company, a production company I formed. It's an LLC.
Okay.
And we're going to have a website where all the podcasts live rather than being scattered all over. This is what I've been working on the past year. This is why I've been so cranky.
Oh,
you say I'm cranky,
huh?
That's
the reason.
You saying I'm cranky?
I thought it was me.
No, it's almost ready to launch. I hope to launch it before the end of the year. And TWiP, TWIM, Urban Agriculture, nice. TWiVo, brand new podcast, This Week in Evolution.
TWiVo.
I've already recorded 3 episodes. I'm waiting for this
TWiVo
website. And then
you should get Ted Cruz on.
In January, we will be launching a 6th podcast, which I don't want to announce yet.
OMG.
But that's it for me. 6 is enough. And if we want more, we have to have other people doing it because I'm stretching myself thin. But that's what Microbe TV is. Do you like the name?
Wow.
I like it.
Absolutely.
And there will be all the podcasts, all the co-hosts, and this is why I asked you for a little bio.
Which I still haven't sent to you.
Oh, yeah, you did send.
You
did send it to me. He doesn't even know when he sent it.
It was that little that you didn't even know you sent it.
Anyway, it is early December.
Yeah.
We have been absent for a while because of travel.
Yeah.
And it is winter here in New York City.
'Tis. Almost. 21st is winter, but
11,
this is...
11, I mean, in terms of the weather, the Celsius number is 11.
It looks pretty gritty out there.
Oh, it's really cloudy, right?
Yeah.
It's to my back,
foggy.
But
foggy. You had a heat wave hitting a cold wave. That's what you get, fog.
Today we have one follow-up, which comes from Colm on Twitter, relevant to Daniel Griffin's point about resident workloads on TWiP. He sends a link to an article in Slate entitled, "Years ago we decided that young doctors need more sleep. The plan might have backfired."
Now they're getting too much sleep, you mean?
I think you mentioned that, Daniel, that maybe you do need to work hard to learn more, right?
Well, I think the challenge was, when they went into this, the idea was that if doctors got more sleep, that it would result in better care. And that's sort of the challenge, is there's so much handoff going on these days, so much change of who's supposed to be taking charge.
Well, that is a problem.
It's not clear. I mean, I think it is much nicer that physicians now get more rest, but I'm not sure. I think, as we've mentioned, that a lot of evidence has suggested it's improved patient care.
As you said, shorter shifts mean doctors have less continuity. That's exactly what you said, and that's what they're talking about here. I didn't realize that this whole thing came about because of a death of a young lady whose mother happened to be a big shot, a New York Daily News columnist, Sydney Zion. She heard that the residents had been on call for 24 hours. She sued the hospitals, started writing about it, and eventually that's it. So if that happened to me, we would never have the change in the hours.
Yeah, no, we used to refer to it as the Libby Zion case.
Yeah.
And then they established this Bell Commission, I think it was.
So there you have it. All right. Let us review our case from TWiP 98, which was, you want to know when it was?
It would seem like it was very long ago. I feel like it was in November or...
Ooh, it might have been October.
October? Is that month before November?
Time,
well, it was right before Halloween, so yeah.
This is the month before.
TWiP 98 was October 30th.
October.
Okay.
It was that Halloween?
Yeah.
30 days,
The
half
day
September.
before, I think,
Day
right?
before.
And
Halloween Eve.
we've tried to do a scary case, right?
Yes. Hopefully it was scary.
Okay. What was it, Daniel?
Well, we have some notes here that Vincent put down. He mentions that our individual who was suffering from this ailment was a professor, clinician, teacher, researcher in his 50s who had presented with a lesion on his big toe, the anterior portion, the tip, that it was nodular. There was no surrounding redness. The area was itchy, and there was a small central black area the size of a pencil tip. And he was concerned because he felt like it was getting larger over the last week. And then spooky is thrown in. And there was a mention of travels where he had recently been to Brazil to attend a conference. He'd been there for a few weeks, and he noticed this problem about a week after he returned. He had reported time on the beach, but that he had worn flip-flops. And he did say he went to a lot of different beaches, some crowded, some not crowded. He was there with his wife, a healthy man, and no prior medical problems.
We have a number of guesses. First one is from Mark, who writes, the temperature in Oklahoma is 12 degrees C today and rainy. Is that a guess? My guess is Tunga penetrans, which is native to South America. The black point at the center of the itchy toe lesion is the flea, which are legs, spiracles, and egg-laying apparatus. Female flea burrows into the skin, resides in sand or dirt, which is where the professor came in contact with flea. Treatment is surgical incision. If the burrowed female flea dies, the lesion can become infected.
Right.
Dickson.
Peter writes, greetings, TWiP team. This week's case seems to be a good match for tungiasis caused by the chigo or sand flea, Tunga penetrans. Gravid female Tunga penetrans burrow into exposed skin on the feet of mammals and remain there for 2 weeks while feeding on host blood. The flea will swell dramatically as it feeds and its eggs develop, sometimes causing intense irritation. Infection is characterized by a swollen red lesion with a black dot at the center. This black dot is the flea's exposed hind legs and respiratory spiracles. Treatment is surgical extraction of the flea, followed by thorough cleansing of the wound and application of topical antibiotic to prevent secondary infection. This case is fortunately just one flea. However, people in the developing world can have seriously debilitating infestations of many fleas.
Daniel.
Carol writes, greetings, doctors. In keeping with the Halloween episode theme, I would like to believe that the unfortunate professor in this week's case study contracted a new parasite that results in complete zombification of the host. But alas, or fortunately, that would not be the correct answer. I think I would have heard about a zombie rampaging in New York. A more realistic guess would be that he is host to a sand flea, specifically a gravid Tunga penetrans. Much like Dickson, I recommend removal, but not of the whole toe. Just the flea and or the nodule she is living in. Carolyn, Victoria, where it is sunny and 10°C, winter has truly begun.
Right.
It's New South Wales?
Victoria?
Australia.
No, but it could be the city of Victoria on the island of Vancouver.
Yeah, it has to, because Australia has summer now, right?
Yes.
Venkot writes, Dear TWiP team, I was way off in guesswork last time. Hopefully I redeem myself. I think the professor could have acquired tungiasis caused by Tunga penetrans, quite common in South America. Visits to the beaches. The black dot gives away the diagnosis. It was awful to read about this. Hopefully he can get rid of it, which as of today typically requires surgical removal. Several topical drugs are available. None seems to work best. I also read that the disease has become a major burden in Africa, where it is believed to have been imported from outside. I remember writing that I am fascinated by parasites, but I will reconsider my position after this case. I think they are disgusting. Vincent, I like your approach to eradicating diseases by culling the mosquitoes, but not sure if it is entirely beneficial. For all we know about molecular biology and epigenetics, the mosquito may contain a protein yet to be discovered, which could become a lifesaver. There are plenty of examples in the microbe world where they contributed a wonderful drug to humans. Yes, we cannot simply stand back and let them threaten us. At the same time, we have to be sensitive to the fact that what we are disturbing is the formidable nature itself and its grand design. It will stage a bigger comeback. Absolutely. I was joking. Dickson.
Alan writes, good morning, professors. The diagnosis is tungiasis caused by the female Tunga penetrans flea. The surgical removal is recommended for treatment. Thanks for your fascinating and informative podcast, especially this week in parasitism, Alan.
Yeah, look, Alan is a dermatologist in Chicago.
That's right.
Now, he uses two things that I would like Daniel to comment on. These abbreviations.
Oh, the abbreviations.
DX and TX.
So DX is sort of shorthand for diagnosis, and TX is treatment.
Seems to make sense.
Do you use those, Daniel?
I use the DX a little bit. Yeah, sometimes I think I've used the TX as well, and I'll often use an R with a little X as well.
Prescription, right?
For a prescription or treatment. Yeah.
Are there any other XXs?
It's actually crazy the amount of these little acronyms. I think we've talked about these little ways of shortening things instead of writing them full out. I'm a big fan, usually I have to admit, of writing stuff out.
Yeah.
Okay. You're next.
Zachary writes, Dear TWiP doctors, it appears as though this 50-something professor has been jiggered. Tunga penetrans, otherwise known as the chigo flea, is the culprit here. The flea is native to Central and South America. The female of the species burrows into the skin to lay her eggs, causing a condition known as tungiasis. Treatment is surgical removal of the flea followed by a topical antibiotic ointment to prevent secondary infection. The flea is not to be confused with the North American chigger that we have here in the States.
Which is an arachnid, by the way.
The ground is frosted and hard here in eastern Washington as it is currently 0 degrees C. At least the sun is out. No sun yet, but I am hopeful for a plentiful snowpack to accumulate in the Cascades this year. Keep churning out the great episodes, Zachary.
Well, El Nino will certainly grant you that because it's going to be a very, very wet year all the way down the west coast of the United States, apparently.
Elise writes, Dear TWiP, trifecta. As always, many thanks for your podcast. I missed the previous case study due to an onslaught of life minutiae, but I am back and will hazard a diagnosis for the professor freshly returned from Brazil who discovered an itchy growing lesion on his toe. I suspect he has tungiasis, which is also called bicho do pé in Portuguese. The translation of this is foot bug, though this moniker is not the only reason I make this diagnosis. Tungiasis is caused by female sand fleas which burrow into skin, usually in their host's foot. Once inside, the flea drinks blood, lays her eggs, and dies, after which the eggs fall out of the host. Even though the professor wore flip-flops on the beach, it is still possible for him to have contracted the flea because his toes were still exposed to the sand. Now, I will note the use of flip-flops, which means that Elise is quite young, because it's only us old folks that call them thongs, which elicits peals of laughter among the youth, because they think we're talking about underwear.
Or bathing suits or something.
Flip-flops.
Yeah.
To double-check my thinking, I did a Google image search, and Dr. Griffin's description of the patient's toe nodule was so detailed that it was very easy to feel a little more secure in my diagnosis. If the lesion is growing, and if I'm correct, does this mean that the parasitic flea was about to release her eggs? I read that there is the opportunity for secondary infections in the spot where the flea once resided. What is the appropriate treatment? Does this mean that one really needs always to wear full shoes on the beach? If so, that's a bit of a disappointment.
Yeah, really.
Thank you so much again for your work, and I look forward to hearing TWiP 99. Now, this brings images to me of a nude beach with everyone naked wearing shoes.
Right.
So they avoid tungiasis, if that in case is the correct diagnosis.
But I think the tungiasis could get somewhere else
well,
if you were
true.
naked except for
This is
shoes.
true.
Yeah.
If you sat down, but if you just walked around all day.
That is a great point, though, because I've never heard of tunga penetrans anywhere else but on the feet.
Really?
That's right.
Well, you would know. You are the parasitologist.
I've heard more about this than most because I'm older than everybody here. But
Is that what it is?
maybe.
That's what it is.
Perhaps.
You're next, Dick.
Okay, John writes, and he's an eloquent expositor. After a night of debauchery, a single female flea of the species Tunga penetrans, lost and alone in the world, searches for a warm, safe place to raise a family. Having neglected protection during her last sexual encounter, she is now pregnant and alone in the world. All seems lost.
You lost your place.
I did. All seems lost. I thought it was a period. All seems lost. Lacking the body warmth and resources to grow her offspring, she searches for a new hope There should be some organ music in the background here. On the horizon, a figure looms, meandering towards her, rushing and hoping to secure a safe place. She leaps at the figure. Finding herself on the toe of a professor, she relishes in her newfound home and burrows into the skin. Little did she know that this was the calm before the storm, as her new host was going to discover her, and she would be in for the fight of her life. My guess is tongue penetrans infection. Grab a kitchen lidocaine, knife, Windex, disinfectant, and chop it off. That's pretty... well, whatever. I may have anthropomorphized the flea slightly, in that she is a flea and not a human. This would be my first email into TWiP podcasts, or TWi podcasts. I have listened to all the podcasts, and I'm a huge fan. Keep writing, John. That's good good prose. I like it. This should be a longer story next time.
Jesse writes, Dear Twipsters, here's what Dr. Google and Messieurs Wiki and Pedia instruct. The erudite and sandal-shod traveler of Brazilian beaches has likely acquired a case of tungiasis, wherein a burrowing female sand flea, Tunga penetrans, has established her nursery in the subdermal skin layers of the big toe. T. penetrans is thought to be originally native to the West Indies and was described by the Spanish in 1526. European traders and their unshod crews quickly spread this nasty creature throughout Latin America and West Africa. The dark center spot in the lesion are the female flea's lady bits, anus and rear air hole sticking above the skin to attract gentlemen passers-by. The female's belly swells with the growth of several hundred eggs, which she excretes over the course of several days. Eventually, the mother dies, but her expelled eggs develop in the soil to start anew. While not an avid jumper, they do have a 20-centimeter vertical leap, so flip-flops don't provide complete protection. A successful repellent is said to be Zanzarin, made from coconut oil, jojoba oil, and aloe vera. Shoes and frequently swept concrete floorings are the most effective preventive measures. YouTube contains many graphic images of rough field surgery set up to remove dozens of gravid female jiggers from the sore and battered feet of people suffering from an infestation. Thanks for all the wonderful podcasts. They really are a lot of fun. And I'm just going to say, if it does turn out that this is the right diagnosis,
right.
I'm going to go back and make some comments about some of the things here.
Sure. Yeah, I want this one in particular. What's going on? Eric writes, Dear TWiP Triumvirate, I'm writing with a guess for the case of the week for TWiP 98. I will guess that the gentleman has returned from Brazil with an unintended souvenir in his big toe consisting of a single chigo flea or Tunga penetrans, a delightfully descriptive name. The locals might have called it bicho de pé. That central black dot is likely the tail of the flea itself, busily enjoying the nutrients in his toe. Or as the previous writer said, the lady bits.
Yeah.
Thank you for another great case of the week. Definitely apropos of Halloween. Currently 55, raining 25-mile-per-hour winds in Seattle at the height of a typical November storm.
Interesting.
And that's it for our guesses. Let me just check at the last minute here to see if one didn't happen to come in. Yep, that's it. By the way, Dickson and Daniel, I got a email from someone in Tanzania who has a rare collection of Buprestidae, which are huge bugs, and he sent a picture. He wants to know if I want to buy them.
Buy them?
What would be my price? He said,
50 cents
what
each.
is your professorial price?
We'd have to think about this for a while, I think.
Why would I want to buy these things?
Buprestidae? I don't know.
What is a Buprestidae?
Well, show me a picture and I'll tell you.
If I turn this, it'll interrupt the recording.
No, I have to take a look at them. So may I make one comment before Daniel begins his expository remarks?
Yeah, sure.
And that is, this is an interesting epidemiological situation. Yes, the West Indies is thought to be the origin of Tunga penetrans. Then it moved to South America. And then it invaded Africa. So how can you imagine this happening? What events led up to the distribution of Tunga penetrans?
All right, so it started where? West Indies?
West Indies.
And then went where?
South America.
And then Africa?
West Africa, not East Africa, West Africa.
Slave trade?
Yeah, you got it right. you got
But in the opposite direction.
exactly. So what was you see, Tunga penetrans lives in sand.
The ballast in the ship.
Yes, exactly.
You told this story before, and I listened. See,
I might have. Did I really?
Once, actually, you said that they had a lot of bricks in the
that's right.
Oscillation, and they used that to pave the graves.
In Puerto Rico, they built streets out of them.
They built streets.
But this is different. They're taking ballast now from the New World and bringing it back to the old.
Consisting of sand.
Yeah, and Tunga penetrans.
It sounds good. I'm just worried that this is a Dickson
another
story.
Apocryphal. Well, that was my favorite Greek philosopher, Hippocrates.
Oh, okay.
No, really. I heard these stories from Roger W. Williams, who knew everything about medical entomology here at Columbia, and he was my guru. So I'm just quoting now. And to tell those stories means that you understand things about human behavior that takes you beyond the parasitosis, basically, and gets you involved in sociology, that sort of thing.
Okay.
All right. So back to the guessing. So
from
Vincent,
Brazil.
Dickson, what do you guys think?
Well, I'm sure
you're going with the crowd?
No, absolutely. No, I had that diagnosis nailed before you got halfway through the description of the toe.
You did?
Once you said it was a white I was called into the dermatology department about 30 years ago, it seems, to identify this. And they had never heard of it at that point. And so I said, that's a case of Tunga penetrans. I've never seen that before.
So the Tunga is a flea?
Yeah.
And this
parasitic flea.
Would this be an ectoparasite?
No, not in this case. It's an endoparasite.
Does it burrows?
It does.
It
attaches
flea.
Its siphon is attached to a capillary.
Now, why do you call it a parasitic flea?
Because it's underneath the skin and in the tissue of the host. The others are occasional predators on humans.
No, this is where this one lives and reproduces.
Yeah, it lives its whole life out there.
What does it look like?
It's a little
tiny
round.
Flea.
It looks like a little grape.
I'm showing a picture.
Oh,
a little white grape.
Which is giving away the fact that everybody is correct. Everybody got it right.
Yes, they did.
How did you diagnose this, Daniel?
So actually, the funny thing, right, is he's a clinician, so he calls up his buddy who's the surgeon and says, "You got to remove this thing," cuts it out, and then sends it to my other friend who's a pathologist, right?
Sure.
So and my other friend is a great guy. He was very excited.
I'm sure.
So
they were over there too because.
Yeah, so a lot of people described what was going on.
Yeah.
Is this flea, this female flea?
That's right.
She burrows on in, and then the eggs develop while she's enjoying the wonderful, warm, nutritious environment.
Correct.
So she's pregnant before she gets in there.
I guess that was one of the things we asked Dickson about that. Do you think she's pregnant before she gets in?
I'm a little vague on that. I'm vague on that, so don't pin me down on that one. I don't know the answer.
I actually think that she's pregnant when she enters. That's my understanding. My understanding is that the pregnant flea, because otherwise you think about it, how is she going to meet a guy? How's she going to meet a male flea burrowed in there? My understanding is she's pregnant and then she burrows in.
Yeah, I think
then the eggs develop. But yeah,
we
maybe
could look this up actually.
Yeah. Someone should check. Someone should check that out.
Why don't I get my?
Do you have this in your parasitic?
Yeah, there it is, right there.
We have everything.
Yeah, that's right. It should be in there.
No, it's there because I remembered that John Carapello made a drawing for the book of the Tunga penetrans.
So he had it excised himself because he knew what it was.
Well, he knew the surgeon, but it still was done it was done at the hospital. It wasn't like he had his buddy over for drinks and then had it taken out.
So would you make a little incision and take this out and
so that's the thing. You don't need. I mean, it was sort of nice for this situation where the whole thing was cut out, so you actually have the whole flea and the surrounding tissue.
The eggs
that was the case that I told you about just now.
So this one has eggs in the lesion already.
Well, the eggs hadn't been laid all together.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I do have the sense, right, that I don't know if that they're pregnant when they go in, that they don't get impregnated while they're there.
I'm about to read about this. You guys,
okay, so we'll continue. We will.
And here's this wonderful white lesion with the black dot on the nipple also.
The size of it is like a leishmania, cutaneous leishmaniasis, right?
Well,
It doesn't have the black dot, but
it doesn't have a craterform lesion either.
That's a craterform lesion?
Yeah, this is what you're looking at really is the flea itself through the epidermis.
Yeah,
got it.
So I will comment on some of the things that Dickson said, and then the writer that actually it kind of overlaps. So the geographic distribution, as commented, started in the West Indies, moved to South America, and then actually at this point has spread throughout Africa. It started in the West, and there is even some in India now, where I was just visiting, though I was fortunate not to have to.
Yeah, well, here's it's sort of a hedge on this. It says after insemination, the female flea attaches itself to the skin of the toes, soles of the feet, or the legs, and becomes enveloped by host tissue. So it sounds like mating occurs outside the host itself, and then the flea invades the tissues. But the male flea also feeds on blood.
That's unusual.
That's what it says. Well, all fleas feed on blood, actually.
Not just females?
Well, no, any flea. Every flea in the world feeds on blood.
Different from mosquitoes, where only the females feed on blood.
That's correct. That's exactly right.
Mosquitoes,
yeah, exactly right. And but black flies also, all male and females feed on blood as well.
And so vampires, both male and female, drink blood?
Absolutely.
Okay. Got it. Sorry.
I didn't know there were female vampires until recently. I thought it was a male kind of thing.
Where else would they come from?
Yes,
you have to have a sort of a mating ritual of vampires.
Well, no, I thought it was like a person became. Okay, anyway,
right.
So I'll have to read more on vampires.
That's a vertical transmission rather than horizontal.
Yeah, I didn't know there was a. Yeah, I thought it was purely horizontal. But so we had someone talk about the flea being an avid jumper with 20-centimeter vertical leaps. What do you think, Dickson? What do you think about that?
I don't know. That's a reach. Okay. Let's see if I can find something in the text.
So my understanding was, as Dickson was saying, that these are typically the feet of mammals. But I will say that's about 95% true. As one of our early emailers sent in, there are cases where there's a lot of ectopic and multiple infestations of these in the face. I mean, you could list a body part. After the feet, hands tend to be the next most common. And people say it's something about the nature of your fingers and your toes, but it's also the fact that they claim that this is not a great jumper. Some fleas are pretty good jumpers. This particular type of flea, my understanding, is not a great jumper, which is why we're seeing that.
I think that's
but there was a paper, it's about a year ago, I just brought it up quickly, ectopic localization of tungiasis, where they went through like that other 5%.
Right.
Where are they? And, I
don't even go there.
I won't even read. Basically,
that bathers on the beach could get infestations in all kinds of parts that we don't want to know about.
It's the nude beach visualization.
Oh my God.
You know what? If you're gonna wear shoes, wear some other stuff too.
Fleas will have to find their way to some
what
place.
Beaches? We're not going to get this in the U.S., obviously. No. You're going to get it where, Dickson? Tropical?
Yeah, and fortunately, it's not that common. This isn't like a huge, returning traveler problem.
That is true.
There's plenty of other things our returning travelers get.
Why
I think we've
think
discussed
that's true,
those.
by the way? Why do you think it's not so common anymore?
Well, if you think about the fleas, right? The flea isn't going to be able to just live there in the sand for a very long time without being able to take its blood meals. So there's got to be mammals around that it can be basically going through this cycle with. So I think a lot of the beaches that tourists now go to, the dogs, the stray mammals have been, they're going to tourist beaches.
So these fleas infest other mammals as well.
They do, but people with these usually have them removed because they're tourists and they get an infection of something and they go right away to their dermatologist. So the fleas never get a chance to deposit their eggs in the sand. So I think that really keeps the numbers down. Whereas in the old days, when they didn't know what this was, everybody who went onto the beach, coming ashore, so to speak, would become exposed to these fleas right away.
So the cycle would be someone is infected, the eggs drop on the sand.
Right.
They hatch, they develop into a flea who then infects someone else. So this is all restricted to sandy areas?
That's correct.
Why is this?
I guess that's because you have to ask a flea that question.
Yeah.
I really don't know why sandflies prefer sand and
what other animals would these fleas infect besides people? Anything that goes on the
mammals.
beach?
It says mammals, but I think those are harder to infect because a lot of mammals have cornified layers on the bottoms of their feet and they're very hard to penetrate.
I'll bet these guys are in the forest as well. We just don't.
No, and that's, if you look at the geographic distribution, it's not just coastal. So they have a little broader geographical spread than you would think by referring to them as sand fleas. So they can be actually farther.
We didn't mention the intense itching. I mean, we should say something about that because auto amputation is common in the tropics where there is no medical aid. These things really cause an enormous itching sensation. And why an animal would want to do that? Because the urge is to get rid of it then, right? These should be fairly silent in terms of their pathological consequences, but not this one.
Yeah.
And so I've seen some pictures of the bottoms of feet where they had over 100 tunga penetrans on the bottom of their feet.
Ooh.
And the reason why I saw the picture was because the person had their foot amputated.
Wow.
They could not stand the pain and itching from this with so many on the bottom of their feet, and someone apparently had to perform an amputation.
Yeah, I'm not sure they had to.
But they wanted it. I mean, they screamed for it because they couldn't sleep, they couldn't eat, they couldn't do anything.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say with limited, it doesn't take a lot of technology to treat this. You don't need to cut out the whole area. You can actually take a needle and put it in and basically sort of curette out the flea.
Kill it.
And so you sit there and it's like removing a splinter. You're in with the needle, but then instead of either fish it or just kill it, so that it can't continue to enlarge. It's.
And then you'd have to distinguish this from the botfly, right? Mm-hmm. So you have other things on the beach that are buzzing around trying to give you miseries also. So, tropical beaches are pretty dangerous. And then you jump in the water and some white shark comes along. So it's feast or famine here,
folks. Did you get
any
parasites in the water, Dickson?
Not in salt water.
None?
No, not that I know of. Can you think of any?
Actually, in the salt water? In the salt water?
I mean, clam diggers itch. I wouldn't call that a disease. It's schistosomes from migratory waterfowl. It gives you a rash, a temporary rash, but I don't know of any parasitic diseases that are transmitted in salt water. If anybody out there knows of one, please inform us.
So someone asked what the treatment was, and it's just excision and then...
Excision, or what's even easier, just put a needle in and just curettage out the flea.
But that's it then, nothing else.
And I think people did mention stuff we always forget to mention, but that we normally do is you put antibiotic on it, you clean it, normal sort of wound care.
And you shouldn't forget these are breathing animals. They're taking blood from meals, but they're breathing. So that black area is not only the lady parts, as you put it, but it's also spiracles like they have in fly larvae.
Right.
So they breathe through that.
That's like the bot fly.
Yeah, if you covered it over with Vaseline or something like this and completely shut them off, they may die just as a result of that.
Yeah. We don't talk about that as treatment. I was sort of thinking about that, as Dickson was saying. And I think part of it is you want to get the foreign body out. Now, the other, like the bot fly, the other myiasis things, they'll come out when they're suffocating. Sure. I think the flea will just die. It's really kind of stuck in there. It's so much larger than the opening.
No, that is true. That is true.
All right, I guess that's it, Daniel, right? For that.
And was it spooky? It seems spooky.
Someone said it was a good Halloween one.
I knew what it was, so it wasn't that spooky. But
I think the idea of something crawling beneath your flesh
unnerving.
is spooky, yeah.
I should have presented the guy with the 100 of them in his foot. I guess
that would have been very unnerving.
That's sort of, rather than spooky, unnerving.
Yeah, exactly right.
We actually have a paper today.
Oh, we have a good paper
has been
today.
Suggested by many, many people.
Yeah.
Let me just tell you a few of the excerpts here. Hunter wrote, "Greetings, good sirs. I'm a longtime fan of TWiP, though I'm just now finally caught up to the most recent episode. Ever since seeing Monsters Inside Me several years ago, I've been super interested in parasites, a fact that my friends clearly know well, as several of them forwarded me the following article, which we will do, and his link is to Live Science. Man dies after tapeworm inside him gets cancer. The thought that it's possible to get tumors from non-human cancer cells is pretty trippy. Anyway, thank you all so much for doing this podcast. I plan to start TWiV and TWIM soon. I just need to get all the old episodes that don't appear to be on iTunes. And Hunter, by the way, I can fix that. They're around. You can go to the websites, but I'm going to fix that. at some point on iTunes, because they can all be there. I really enjoy the banter you guys have. The format of a conversation between a few people makes the information much easier to retain when compared to having it lectured at you. Even without you being able to hear us, this format makes it easy to talk along with the show, as well as to tell other people about what you learned, all of which makes it stick. And that's exactly why I wanted to start these to begin with. I thought conversations would be easier to listen to. I did have one final question, though. Whatever happened to Dickson's Parasite ebook? I've been hearing about it for years now. It took me a long time to catch up and can't afford any of the physical copies I find online. Plus, I like to be able to easily copy-paste information to people. Thanks again for all that you guys do. And this is cool. Hunter works for Blizzard Entertainment, and this would make my kids really excited.
Hunter, if you send me your email address, I'll send you the PDF.
Send your email to the same email, twip@twiv.tv. I'll pass it on to to Dickson. Blizzard Entertainment, by the way, is the maker of many games, including World of Warcraft, which my kids played for years.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
All right.
Yeah, no, Dickson, did you want to mention that we're actually trying to get another edition of parasitic diseases?
Not just trying. We are going to get
We're in process.
We're going to get a 6th edition out of this. I also must mention, Hunter, if you were inspired by Monsters Inside Me, I'm the science advisor for that show. So I'll pass that back to the producer of the show.
That's fiction, isn't it?
No. These are real cases, just like the ones we talk about here.
Ours are better.
Of course, but they're still real.
Give us a few $100,000 and we'll make fancy productions too.
Is that a crowdsource?
Yeah. So then also we got this article sent from Theodore, from Peter, from Robin, Dr. Wink. They all sent links to this same article.
Right.
And even though Daniel had picked another one already, I said we need to do this to satisfy our fans. And this is actually a case study, really, Daniel, right?
It is. It's a great case study. It's a brief report, as they say. And it is. It's a case study. And I must say, I'm not upset that my other paper was, say, deferred till a later time, because this is great stuff.
This is in the New England Journal of Medicine, a brief report, malignant transformation of Hymenoloplus nana in a human host. Is that pronounced correctly? Hymenoloplus nana. Now, Dickson, I have a question for you.
Please.
They call this the dwarf tapeworm, the most common human tapeworm, 75 million people, carriers, asymptomatic infections. Yeah. Why didn't we talk about this on TWiP? Doesn't cause any disease?
That's exactly why we didn't. The tapeworms in general, the adult tapeworms in general, cause no disease whatsoever. They just sit there and absorb portions of your meal. And this one is certainly no exception. It's a very small tapeworm. The segments are very narrow. The head of this scolex is almost not visible to the naked eye. And it doesn't get very long, perhaps a yard or two in length. And it doesn't do anything. It just sits there.
Mostly it's in the intestine, right?
It's only in the intestine.
Small intestine.
In fact, all adult tapeworms live in the small intestine. Every single one of them, regardless of the mammal, they're all in the small intestine, period. So
it does the whole cycle in you.
Yeah.
It attaches the intestine, it lays eggs, they hatch, and they reattach.
It has two versions of its life cycle. It can be auto-infectious, as you're describing now, or it can involve an intermediate host.
So you would shed the eggs in the feces and someone else would get it.
A beetle, mostly a beetle, a larva.
Can you pass it to other humans?
You can.
How would you acquire it?
Well, you can eat the egg, you see, because it's auto-infectious. So the egg doesn't require, the hexacanth larva inside the egg does not require an intermediate host to complete the life cycle, although it can.
They also mentioned that extra-intestinal infections are rare.
Yeah, they are very rare. I mean, this is a bizarre case. There's no question about this. There's another related tapeworm called Hymenoloplus Diminuta. Hymenoloplus Diminuta.
Hymenoloplus.
Yeah. So the Hymenoloplus Diminuta is an infection of rodents and sometimes people, and it's used as a laboratory model for studying almost all of the adult tapeworms now.
Hymenoloplus.
And Larry Roberts, who might be listening, who knows, was at one time the acknowledged world leader in tapeworm biology, and he was a good friend of mine. So we used to hang out together at meetings and just talk about worms.
Daniel, since
Yes.
you are so good,
Yum.
since you are so good at case reports, would you like to present this case?
Oh, yeah,
report?
please do.
I think that would be
Sure.
appropriate.
Sure. Well, we'll start off, I think, as you mentioned, that this is a very common tapeworm, 75 million people. And I will just throw in, though rarely there can be symptoms. When you just get so much of these, there can be a bloating. Dickson shrug. I just want to be like really specific here, so we don't get any don't get any emails going.
Have you ever seen a case of Hymenoloplus?
No, and I think that's little kids have issues with bloating. They would see the pediatrician. I bet the pediatrician wouldn't know what it was, and then it would probably go away.
And when you say cases, that implies disease.
Yeah.
So therefore,
Signs or symptoms, Dickson?
none.
Yep.
None.
So let us start. So here we have this January 2013. There's a 41-year-old man from Colombia. This man is HIV infected since 2006, right? So we're 7 years since the time of diagnosis. He's not taken his medicines. His CD4 count is down at 28. I want to give people, like, what does that mean? That is the number of CD4 cells in a cubic millimeter, right? So a milliliter of blood. So when people say, oh, they have 2, well, go ahead and multiply that out. That's 28, times 1,000. So 28,000, right, per liter. But to give you a normal should be up at about 1,000. So this is quite low. And particularly because 200 is when it's really clear that you're immunocompromised. And below 50, you are severely immunocompromised. So this man has advanced HIV with real destruction of his immune system, and he's not taking his medicine. So in each one of these milliliters, he's got 70,000 copies of HIV. So he's viremic. His immune system is in bad shape. He comes in with several months of cough, fever, weight loss. And when they do a stool examination, they see 2 things, which later we're going to find out are interesting. They find eggs of H. nana and these blastocystis hominis cysts. And just for a plug for some of those folks that I was hanging out with in Peru recently, we were joking about, we have these memorization tricks, how you remember everything. And the H. nana, the little eggs, they have these polar bodies. And so our mnemonic was that you get your polar bear from your nana, and that's how you remember it's the... Anyway, so...
Wonderful.
Those of you studying to like...
Can I use that for a title of this episode?
Sure. And now this gentleman is then they do a CAT scan, right? Computed tomographic imaging, and they notice he's got all these lung nodules, and they're in various size. They also notice that he's got these nodules in his liver, his adrenal glands, really all over the place. Okay, they're going to go ahead and they're going to do some biopsies and look at these. And I'll jump a little ahead.
Can I ask you a question? They say they do
sure.
a touch preparation.
Yes.
Can you tell us what that is?
Usually you basically take it and put it right onto a slide and then look at it.
So you do a biopsy and then right on the
Dab it on the
you
slide
dab
and
it.
then stain it, and then whatever on the slide gets looked at.
Got it.
And for interesting enough, for certain things, the touch prep can be more sensitive than the biopsy.
Sure, they use that a lot for leishmaniasis, by the way. When they biopsy liver and stuff like that and bone marrow, they use a smear. Rather a touch prep rather than a smear.
Yeah, and even a biopsy of the edge of a leishmaniasis. So leishmaniasis would be a classic where this touch prep approach.
Mm-hmm.
So you take that, you boom, put it on the slide, and it can be more sensitive than the biopsy. So they go ahead and do that. So people are thinking here. And they're going to do a lot of testing, but to sort of, when they look at it, they notice a number of features. They notice that there's a proliferation of cells, and they say that these proliferating cells have overt features of malignancies. Well, what are those? They tend to be invading adjacent tissues, so they're not maintaining, sort of staying in the place where they should. They have disordered growth patterns, so you look at it, it looks kind of like a mess. And that's what malignancy sort of loses its sense of order. Monomorphics, they all look like it's the same cell. There's this sort of the same cell that seems to be proliferating.
Clonal.
Looks to be, and I think that's good. And then they notice something that maybe is a little odd, that the high nuclear to cytoplasm ratio.
Right.
And that's a little odd. Normally, when you look at differentiated cells that are maybe a liver cell or a lung cell or a kidney cell, they have a lot of cytoplasm, they've got a lot of stuff going on, and then they have, the central nucleus, which is small relative to the rest of the cell. But here, you have these cells that are really largely nucleus. So maybe people can start thinking in their head of, when we look at a picture, it almost looks like a cyst. I mean, there's this central part that's really large.
That's right.
So they start thinking this is a little odd. And one of the things they notice, too, is the size of these cells.
Right.
Is mammalian cells are usually of a certain size. Let's say they start at 10 microns and then kind of go up in size.
Yep.
You have our little RBCs that not really cells, right? They're sort of this little package that has lost a nucleus. They're down at about 5 microns. These guys are down there about red blood cell size, but they're a nucleus-containing cell.
Exactly.
So they start wondering at this point what could possibly be going on. They have these wonderful pictures that
They do.
this isn't really open source, right? So I don't know if people will be able to get this, or is this? Do you guys know if it's for free or not?
It is. I saw it
get
for
it from
free.
home?
Yeah. On PubMed, it said free article.
Okay. Hopefully it is, because people. It's worth taking a look, because I will say they've got this first figure that has 8 parts, and they've got a great picture of chest X-ray, the CAT scan.
Ooh, I can even see in that chest X-ray.
Yeah,
I mean, that
nasty stuff in
Usually,
there.
chest X-rays do not tell me anything.
No, but this one,
it's quite
that's
clear.
right,
So,
that's right.
Daniel, panel B, where you're looking down.
So think of the person. So if people are looking at
CAT
panel
scan?
B, the way you look at a CAT scan is the person is laying on their back
Got it.
with their feet towards you, and then you're seeing these slices, and each slice actually has a thickness, right? Because didn't have a thickness, there'd be nothing. And there are various thicknesses, and you're looking at a cut here, which actually you could see the trachea, you could see some of the great vessels, and you see these large lesions in both lung fields.
Wow.
And then they show in one of the panels chunks of these tumors. And then you actually start seeing close-ups of these little cells that are in there with this high nuclear to cytoplasmic ratio. And then they even have electron micrographs. I mean, this is... They're sort of looking at everything. So now they do a couple things. One is they say, well, maybe we can culture some of this stuff up. So they take some of the fresh tissue.
May I stop right there and say, was there ever a communication between the parasitology lab and the pathology lab? Because they found 2 parasites. They found Blastocystis hominis and Hymenoloplus nana.
Mm-hmm.
And these guys are looking at these cells saying, what the heck are these things?
And what do you think?
Was
Do you
there
think if they
ever-
called the parasitologist, they'd say, you know what that looks like?
It might have. I wouldn't have known. By the way, I would have if I had been shown that slide while I was still in practice, so to speak. I would not have known what it was. I would have said, "This is strange stuff, indeed." I would have almost opted for plant material, except that there's no outer non-cellular layer that separates the cells.
Yeah.
But the ratio of cytoplasm to nucleus is really odd.
But this is an H&E stain. Would a plant cell have stained that way?
Yeah, it might have, but doesn't look exactly like. But that would have been my best guess. And I've seen some weird things, but this is the weirdest thing I've ever seen on a parasite diagnosis.
Well, they actually say here, this case posed a diagnostic conundrum.
So it did.
And I think in answer to your question, they did actually look at this with could this be like invasive cestodes? And they do talk about the fact that they didn't see any cestode architecture, sort of. Right. So the idea they thought could this be that it was invading? And they didn't see that there were cestode organisms that were invading.
Which cestodes would they have been concerned with if they had seen them?
In the lungs, you mean?
Yeah, because there are 2 that come to mind. One is Echinococcus granulosus, and the other is Echinococcus multilocularis.
Yep.
And in both cases, you can see parasite structures inside the lesions. Mm-hmm. These are just collections of cells, basically. Yep. It's a cell disease.
Yeah.
They ruled out invasive cestodiasis.
Exactly.
I like
But they were wrong, because that's what it turned out to be.
That's right.
So anyway,
not your typical.
I was just thinking about, is this invasive cestodiasis? Not really. Well, we'll get to what it is. Like, what do you call this?
They don't have a name yet.
So this is over the period of months where they're looking at this, right?
Well, they're doing this in cooperation with the CDC. They call up and say, "We're not sure what's going. We need some help here." So this
guy's getting worse
February,
too.
Wasn't it February when they first took the biopsies, and then later on in April
the guy goes on for a while. He eventually has a bad
said
outcome.
his clinical condition deteriorated.
Yes,
and he got tenofovir.
Right.
But still got worse. So, Daniel, if you treat at this late phase, you're not going to recover. Is that right?
It's tough. When his CD4 count is at this low level and he hasn't been on treatment, sometimes if you put them on a full regimen, depending upon how destroyed the immune system is, you can bounce back. But I get the sense this man's been going on for years and years, and there's not going to be a lot of bouncing back. But more so, I think, is this secondary infection. That's ultimately usually what kills people with HIV.
Yeah, right.
Not the virus itself, but either the cancer or the infection or the secondary thing that arises. And ultimately this man does many months later, 4+ months later, does die. So they try to culture. Initially they say maybe these things will grow. We're not sure what it is. And they fail, but again, we're not sure, how do you know at this point what culture conditions to try? Are you...
Can you grow these?
Well, there's a reference in here to some work done with Echinococcus multilocularis stem cells. Because, as I think I've said before, virtually every cell of a cestode could be considered a stem cell, at least in the case of Echinococcus granulosus and multilocularis. So it's possible, although there's no experience with these kinds of tapeworms in people, that all of the cells of Hymenoloplus nana could also be a stem cell, based on what you see here.
Yeah, that's what they suggest, actually, at the end. Yeah.
So, they should grow in vitro, but as the reference to the Echinococcus granulosus reference, a multilocularis reference, rather, said, you need to add human insulin in order to get it to grow. Otherwise, it'll just sit there. And that's what they did. They just sat there for 14 days, and I think that's when the culture was terminated.
4 weeks. They did it 4 weeks. 4 weeks. But nothing happened.
Yeah,
but then they go on and they do this molecular identification. And this is where we hit something.
Yep.
And there's a lot of ways to do this, right? You can do a deep sequencing. You can also do, now they have these sort of pan species or, these sort of broad PCR screening methods. So they start off and they do this pan-fungal, it's a myxogastria and pan-fungal PCR screen. And
what's myxogastria?
Do you want to jump in on that,
Nope.
Dickson?
Not me.
Do I have to Google it?
It just dropped out.
And out of this...
It sounds like a slime mold.
Out of this...
It's myxomycetes, grouping of slime molds.
So they're looking at slime molds and proper fungi.
Right.
And they see that something pops out that is 99% sequence identical to H. nana, which is odd, right? Because they're looking at fungal and slime molds.
Wait a minute, isn't this a fabulous testament to the advance that we have made over the last 10 years? 10 years ago, that would have never been possible.
By leaving science alone.
Yes! No, you
Not
are
regulating
right.
it.
And what good is a sequence of a stupid little tapeworm that doesn't even cause disease? And here's an example of a stupid little tapeworm that does cause disease.
In fact, if we hadn't done the genome of this, we wouldn't have known, right? That's
Not
what
at
you're saying.
all.
Exactly.
Not even a little bit. So it's fabulous that we have this database to rely on now to pin it down. That was in one move. They got that result in one move.
Yep. They must have been surprised.
They were shocked. I'm sure they were shocked.
I think they were. And then, is when they make the contact. Because we're
They
not
say, "Oh, no,
seeing
it can't
any
be. No, it just
recognizable
can't be."
tapeworm tissue. This seems odd. But then they go back, right? And they look at the tissue and they do these hybridizations. And lo and behold, there is H. nana genetic material in these lesions.
How about that?
Yeah.
And then they did some other things too.
Then exactly, they do some deep sequencing, and basically they're confirming.
They use an antibody
that,
to confirm the relationships too.
Yeah, immunohistochemistry.
Immunohistochemistry.
Chemistry, right.
So they show that it's really in the tissues, right?
Unequivocal results, bizarre.
Yeah. So when they go ahead and they confirm that, these cells are H. nana
Amazing.
cells, and they're probably these, we'll call them neoblasts, which is the stem cell of basically a cestode.
Right.
They find by this deep sequencing, they find mutations in a variety of genes, which they say are consistent with, the onset of malignancy, genes involved in growth regulation and so forth.
Isn't that unusual, though?
So I mean, the idea would be that these are cancer cells derived from H. nana, right?
Bizarre.
Yeah, and I think, you sort of wonder, like, how did this happen? Did the H. nana develop a cancer and then it spread to us? I don't think so. I think what happened was these cells had an environment in the villi of the intestines.
That's the cysticercoid stage.
In the cysticercoid stage. And that's where, as they developed mutations, they had a survival advantage. And eventually, I mean, it's sort of like the principles of cancer. Eventually, they've overcome the first pillar, right? They're not dying. They're proliferating. Yeah. And then it's an uncontrolled proliferation. And then eventually, they develop the ability to invade.
So baby, because he had no immune system, they were able to proliferate inside him, whereas in most people, maybe this happens quite often, but most people with immune systems just get rid of the cells once they evade, right?
I think so. I mean, I coin, we'll see if this gets published, it's out there, but the seventh pillar of oncogenesis is that cancers have to evade the immune system because our immune system is always getting rid of them.
That's right.
And here we develop this H. nana cancer. A normal immune system, it doesn't matter that it has all other 6 cancerous features. Our immune system recognizes it, destroys it, and it's game over.
The problem with that, though, is if with 75 million infections, you would think some of those people would also have immune compromised systems that would lead them to similar cancer.
Vincent,
I think
no
that,
autopsies. And most people that die from HIV in places that don't have medical care, you would never know what they died from, right? Maybe a lot of them have died from this. Who knows?
But, you typically do X-rays, and you would see these lesions, right?
In places
Not always.
that don't have the X-rays.
Got it.
Yeah. No, and actually, they even mention here, like now that we're kind of getting into the discussion part,
they're going to go back
they're
and
like,
look.
this isn't the first time that HIV people have been described dying from invasive H. nana.
Well, I remember some papers in which cyanobacter.
But not. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, the blue-green algae. Some group of HIV people actually developed infections from blue-green algae exposure, which is like one of the most primitive microbial life forms on Earth.
Mm-hmm. But the previous H. nana infections in HIV/AIDS patients were not malignant.
Occult.
They weren't.
Right.
Yeah, you're true. They were not like this neoblastic monoclonal proliferation, but they were mutated H. nana. They were not normal H. nana invaders. So they're H. nana that was undergoing some mutational changes. So they were.
What I find interesting was that their cultures didn't allow this organism to proliferate in vitro because you fed it all the stuff that normal mammalian cells would eat, and these cells just sat there. Well, which brings up that one paper about the requirement for human insulin.
They probably didn't have the right conditions, right?
I bet you if they go back, of course they can't now, but maybe they froze some tissue.
They might have,
Because this could be a real good model for stem cell analysis for tapeworms. I mean, there's some biology here that's worth looking at, I think.
Yeah, but it is, I think we're sort of touching on the issue is how common is this? Is this a one-shot deal and it just happened to be at a place where they called the CDC and got all involved? Yeah. Or has this been going on and we didn't have the tools? It didn't happen in the right situation to be, HIV person, they got all these things, they die.
The thing I can't also understand about this case is that the immune system keeps in check the number of cysticercoids that a normal person can be exposed to. So little kids, they don't accumulate guts full of worms usually. They have 5 or 6 and maybe 7 at most. But in this case, you would expect it to just continue to auto-infect, right? And you could accumulate hundreds of or maybe even thousands of worms. It didn't happen. These cysticercoids didn't go on to develop into adult tapeworms. One of them contained a mutation which allowed some of the cells in that cysticercoid perhaps to go on to the 2nd stage and then up to your 7th stages of cancer. And that's really so unlucky for this person.
Well, I think it's numbers here. Is you just had millions of these cells undergoing cycling and selective pressure, and so you get your first hit, and then you get your second hit, and finally.
So Daniel, you mentioned this. So the idea that we don't think they acquired a tumor, that it developed into a tumor within this man.
Right.
Although in their discussion, they bring up this possibility and they cite, the Tasmanian facial tumors, which are transmitted tumors.
Yeah.
And the dog tumor that's transmitted sexually.
Yeah.
And of course, we should not forget the clam tumor,
They forgot. I did notice that they did
How
not
could they
cite
have possibly
the
left it that?
which is
It's so widely known.
which is transmitted. Cancerous cells actually go from clam to clam.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's the way this happened. There's no evidence for it.
This. Yeah, I guess we shouldn't mention the unpublished work about maybe there's similar cancers in the clam world that go from species to species. So
yeah,
this is more along the lines of some of the clam work.
It's
out
weird.
there.
I mean, it's weird because it's not a human cancer cell. It's a tapeworm cell that became an invasive malignancy. That's really off the wall.
So this is really interesting. It's not just one species of a similar related animal. This is a really distinct eukaryotic parasitic cell becoming a cancerous cell, and I would say just showing like how critical the immune system is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
What do you think killed him, Daniel? We can't really conclude that these tumors killed him, right? I mean, he had a lot of them, but
They don't list correctly.
He actually, my understanding is he finally just said enough, and he switched over to comfort measures.
I see. Yeah, palliative care. But he did give them permission to publish the work, which is
That's
good.
true.
He uses tissues also.
Yeah, I mean, he had a lot of things going. He had disseminated fungus histoplasmosis. He had kidney failure, and he finally.
So,
just
what would you
said-
put on the death certificate? Cause of death, Daniel?
Multiple system failure.
No, it's kind of tough. So you would put HIV, but that's not that wasn't the immediate cause of death. And looking through, it's hard to know. I mean, this is, what do you say that he died from this? He probably died from disseminated histoplasmosis.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's what I'm sort of guessing. And this was some other process going on. I mean, if you think about it, most people who die from cancer usually are dying from an overwhelming infection at some point.
Yeah.
It's hard for the cancer to physically kill them.
Neat paper.
It is really interesting. I'm going to throw one little thing in. This was Dickson made a comment. I always like to jump in before the emailers jump in, and it was this idea. And I just think it's a question of the science moving along. There used to be this idea that all the cells of cestodes or parasites had this stem cell potential, but I think recent work has really narrowed them down. So there's only certain neoblastic cells in cestodes that have a stem cell potential. Once a cell differentiates in a cestode, there's no going back. It's lost this.
Okay.
And I just was so I just think that's
I must have missed that one, because I didn't want to believe it. No, that's not true.
So it is interesting. I think there were select cells here, these neoblasts that got in, and they're the ones that became. So it was just a random cell.
So we should mention the first author. There are many authors on this paper. Is Atis Muhlenbach. So the last author is Sharif Zaki. This comes from not only Colombia, but the CDC, Japan is involved in this, London, the Natural History Museum. So
they must
quite
have canvassed the world.
An international collaboration here. So, nice paper. Thanks for everyone. Thanks to everyone who recognized this.
Exactly.
This was in the press and made it, right?
Yeah. No, it was great.
And now it's made it on TWiP, which, of course, is the most impressive achievement, right?
It has been given the stamp of approval.
The TWiP
Daniel,
bump, right?
Wouldn't it be cool if you had a case like that one day, Daniel?
I would think so.
Wouldn't it be cool if you published the paper? We could do it on TWiP, huh?
I would love that.
Well, let's do another. Do you have any more left, Daniel? I'm just kidding. I know you have
infinite number.
No, I was actually struggling to figure out which case we would do today.
Oh dear.
Why is that?
Just because I have so many cases I want to present that are great cases.
Because you're going to keep doing this, right, Dickson?
Absolutely.
This is 99. We're almost to
may
the magic
become
100.
your first case.
What do you mean?
A live case.
Oh. You have some time yet. Only 60, right?
No, I'm about to go to Costa Rica for 2 weeks, so I might come back with something interesting. Who knows?
That'd be great.
No, you don't go to,
it would be great. I beg your pardon.
You don't go to beaches, do you?
We're not beach people, to be honest, but we do go into the deep forest.
But you do eat.
You eat and you get bitten by stuff.
All right.
That's
well,
one never knows.
Keep a diary.
I will, as long as I can write.
So it's been so long. Do I present the case now, or we read emails? We present the
We present the case, yeah.
Do the case.
And then, depending on how much
I'm also
time.
still on India time, so it's like 1:30 in the morning for me. So All right. Well, I should say I struggled because I saw so many great cases these last couple weeks in India that I thought to present one. But then I said, you know what? I'm going to. This is a great case. This needs to be presented. And are we ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Bring it on.
A 53-year-old woman who is visiting her family here in the United States comes in with, she says, intense belly pain. And it's over in the right upper part of her belly. And she tells you she doesn't understand how she got this because she has become a strict vegetarian after being diagnosed with breast cancer. And she's currently on this raw vegetable diet to improve her health. And she felt like this was really helping her immune system, but now she's not feeling so well.
Dickson is holding his eyes.
Yeah. Are you on a raw vegetable diet? Are you...
Wait, keep reading.
So that's our history of present illness.
That's it?
That's all you're going to get. I'm going to give you a little more. Okay, so now we're going to go into past...
Where's she from?
Yeah, I was going to ask that too.
Oh, okay. She's visiting, and she is from Bolivia. She's from
Bolivia.
South America.
I know Bolivia.
Yes. Do you want to know more about her?
Of course.
And I think that's great because I would say you sort of need to know the context.
Pain in the upper right quadrant.
Yeah, someone comes with pain, they come with fever. You always want to know, well, where are you from? Where's this taking place? Am I in southern Africa?
Unde Venice.
Am I in Bolivia?
That's right.
And so she says she's from Bolivia.
Yeah.
And she lives in an agricultural area there in Bolivia. But then
In the mountains or in the valleys?
But then I ask my usual questions, and she says no. She avoids sheep, and she is fearful of dogs.
Right.
So she reports that she has no dog or sheep contact. She doesn't like them. There are sheep in the area, but those and the dogs she keeps her distance from.
What does she do for a living?
That wouldn't have been...
She's a housekeeper.
She's married?
She is married, and she lives with her husband, and she reports no toxic habits.
And nobody else in the family has what she's got.
Just her.
Upper right quadrant pain. Okay. On palpation or just upper right quadrant
We haven't
pain?
gotten there yet.
This developed after she came to the U.S.?
When she came here is when she noticed it. So she's here visiting. I think she's visiting her daughter is the one who lives here.
Right.
But so she has this past medical history, as I mentioned. She was diagnosed with breast cancer. It was a recent diagnosis, but it was localized disease. So they removed the lesion. They did a lumpectomy. They did a lymph node staging. They didn't tell her that she needed any adjuvant or any extra therapy, just the surgical removal of this localized lesion. So the only surgery she's had was this
how long ago was that?
lumpectomy. It was a number of months ago.
A number of months.
So relatively recently. She's not allergic to anything, and she says in general her family is pretty healthy. She doesn't report any diseases in the family.
Did she recall prior to this at any time having an episode of diarrhea by any chance?
Oh, that's a good question.
Thank you.
You know what? I joke that there's what's the difference between the American, the Bolivian, the person visiting Bolivia? It's just sort of how often you have diarrhea, right?
Right.
I mean, people have have diarrhea.
Sure.
Yeah. So have you had diarrhea in the last
But
year?
of course.
How many times?
Wait a minute. What's diarrhea?
Yeah. Have you had loose stools? How
Have
many
you
times?
ever had a form stool?
Yeah. Every so often, yes, she does have a loose stool. So yes, she's had loose stools.
So you mentioned raw vegetables.
Yes, she's on this raw vegetable because she's going to be healthy.
She's been doing that in Bolivia and continued it here in the U.S.?
She's sticking with her raw
What kind of raw
diet.
vegetables are we eating?
So a lot of different stuff. Like here in the U.S., carrots. There, when she's down, she actually will collect plants and buy them in the local markets. And so a number of different plants. And then, she...
Right.
And she doesn't cook them?
She does not cook them because she is on the raw vegetable. Yeah, she rinses them often.
With what?
With gray water.
Well,
all right.
In some places you don't have a choice.
Any insect questions you want to ask about that? Is she bitten by insects? I always like that question, and the answer is always yes.
But of course,
yes.
Reduvids, maybe.
Okay, she doesn't report any large reduvid bugs, and she does not live in a thatched roof house. She lives in a concrete house.
Got it.
People are very proud of that when they live in a concrete house.
You're absolutely right.
Because it's a level above this sort of impoverished mud thatched hut. So no, she lives in a concrete house.
Okay then.
So she had been eating raw vegetables for some time with no symptoms, and this...
Yeah, she's been doing it fine, so it's not even clear, right, that there was a timing associated. We do a physical exam.
Right.
Okay. And she's not febrile. She has this left lumpectomy scar and an axillary scar. And then on exam, it's significant for the fact that her right upper quadrant is very tender, and there is some liver enlargement.
Really?
And I will give you a CBC and liver function tests.
Sure.
Do you guys want those? So her white count is just a little over 10,000, so it's slightly elevated.
Yeah.
And it's mostly eosinophils. She has 60% eosinophils.
No shifts.
Well, I guess the shift would be all these eosinophils.
No neutrophilic shift. No neutrophilic shift.
Well, there's actually, I would say, 20% neutrophils, 20% lymphocytes.
Okay.
But 60% are eosinophils, and her liver function tests, AST, ALT, and AlkPhos, are all normal, actually.
Normal. Of course they are.
Yep. And further tests were done.
Assume that.
Okay. Dickson, I think Dickson likes this one.
I love this one.
You're already there?
Yep.
Good.
Okay.
Anything else?
I don't know. Is there anything else, Vincent? Do you have
That's
any?
how I used to
Vincent,
teach
do you have
this.
any questions? We did do the thing that she's married, and there's no suggestion that there's been any extramarital sexual encounters.
And no
which
drugs, right?
I think it's important. No drugs.
No drinking?
No, she's not a drinker.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
Stool
that's it.
exams?
Stool exams. Well,
Do you want a stool exam? They
Sure.
did. There was a stool exam sent off. I didn't send it off, but it was negative.
Of course it was.
Okay, but I think that's interesting that a stool was sent off.
No, that's...
I actually think it was interesting that it was negative in a woman from Bolivia, in all honesty,
especially,
right?
well, perhaps.
Right? Wouldn't you expect
Especially if they're eating raw vegetables.
Yeah, that's sort of interesting. But
This is
okay.
true, because most of the crops of the world, not ours, but most of the crops of the world are fertilized with either animal or human feces mixed with water. So you'd expect things in them.
Yep. But she doesn't currently have diarrhea at this point,
No.
too. Just
No,
to sort of
that's
mention that.
right. That's right.
Okay, you're still happy with your
happy
with your idea?
Yeah, I'm very happy. And did you do a CT scan?
Yes, I actually have a CT scan.
But you won't show that. Will
That next time you get this, that's one of the tests that was done.
you? Right.
Yep.
And other than this, there are no other symptoms. There are no cognitive or motor
No, that's a good.
alteration.
Yeah. So her neurological exam is completely normal. So she's sharp. Everything's intact. She doesn't have any, as you say, meningeal signs. So her
Okay.
neck is supple.
Yeah.
Eye exam was fine with no evidence of increased intracranial pressure.
Very good. I got enough.
Okay.
Dixon and I are all set.
I believe we are.
I like this case.
Well, we may be
dead wrong.
We may be dead wrong. Yeah.
You know.
Because this guy has ringers.
Yeah, he does.
Every so often I throw
The
them out.
vegetables could be a ringer.
He does. He has Ringer's solution too, I bet.
Yeah, he does.
There's
All
got to be a solution to his Ringer.
Do you guys want to know about like raw goat milk products or anything? No, just
Oh.
asking.
Drink
Really?
milk.
She,
Raw
she
milk
drinks
product?
raw milk as well?
No, she's just on the vegetables.
Oh, okay.
But what does she
No
drink?
listeria.
Does she drink milk?
No, she doesn't. She
No
doesn't.
milk.
She's on this raw vegetable
So
diet.
she just eats vegetables, nothing else?
Well, it's this part of this cleansing,
I
immune
understand.
boosting.
But no meat, no
Very
no fish.
challenging.
No. It's
No
been going. This
shellfish?
has been going on for a number of months. Prior to this, though,
Yeah.
this, I guess we should mention. Prior to this, though, she did have a normal diet. So prior to this, she
In Bolivia, that means what?
so a little bit of meat in
She
the
ate
diet.
guinea pig and she ate...
I don't know if I've never eaten guinea pig. Does it taste good?
It does.
I've always been sort of scared to eat guinea pig.
It's like regular meat.
Like chicken? Does it taste like
It's
chicken?
a little bit like chicken. A little bit like frog's legs.
No, she ate meat. She drank milk, dairy milk,
Yeah.
goat.
How
A
many
lot of goat
months?
stuff.
How many months before would you say she was doing this?
So that was about 5 months is when the diet changed from the prior
Yeah.
normal Bolivian diet.
Yeah, I'm sticking.
There
with
you
the,
go.
I'm sticking with the raw vegetables.
Okay.
No, I'm
I'm set on that.
solidly ensconced.
Should we do a couple of
diagnosis.
emails here?
Sure.
First one is from Maria. Hello, I'm Maria from Mahidol University in Thailand. I'm interested in knowing the types of virus that infect Plasmodium parasites. Where can I get that information? So I emailed Max Nybert, who works on viruses of Trichomonas. I said, are there any Plasmodium? He said, I don't know of any. Do you know of any?
I don't.
So Maria,
Right.
you can't get that information. It doesn't exist. There must be viruses of Plasmodium, though, right?
They've looked a lot, I'm sure.
That's interesting.
They've sequenced the entire genome, so I'm sure they must have run across some spurious DNA sequences.
I wonder if there are some viral signatures in that genome.
Well, we can check it, by the way. You can check that.
Not me, because I don't have the skills.
Ah, really?
Yeah, I don't.
Oh, come on, Vincent. I thought you were invincible.
No pun intended. I can die right away.
By the way, that's pronounced Midol University.
Midol?
Midol, yeah. Midol.
It's a painkiller.
It's also pronounced Midol.
Midol?
Yeah, Midol.
Have you been there?
I have, actually. It's in Bangkok.
Okay.
It's a wonderful university.
There's this wonderful virology blog by Vincent Racaniello where he says that many protozoan parasites, including Plasmodium, are infected with viruses.
You know, that's funny.
You did say that.
When I Googled this, I got my blog is one of the top hits, and that was from a paper.
Well,
That sentence, and I looked again, and I didn't see a reference.
I don't know of any.
And Max Nybert said there aren't, as far as he knows.
I mean,
they're not any.
There's some in Trichomonas. There's some in Leishmania. There's some in Giardia, as I recall.
Yeah, that's right.
But I don't know of any others.
You know, in some cases, it's a matter of looking, but Plasmodium.
Oh, they've looked.
So
studied, trust me.
Yeah.
They've looked.
However, we should go into the genome, Dickson. You and I can do that. We'll mine the genome.
You know what? We'll just blindly walk into it and see what happens.
Daniel, take the next one, please. This is going back a bit, but there's some other stuff here that's good.
So this is, where are we at right now? Mark writes, hello. It is cool. In Muskogee, Oklahoma?
How do you say that?
How do you pronounce that?
Muskogee? Dickson.
I don't know.
Muskogee? Well, anyway, that place in Oklahoma.
I do not know.
Okay. High was around 65 degrees Fahrenheit and low around 41 degrees. It is nice fall weather. I am a little late in determining a possible guess on case number 97. He actually gets this right. He says, my guess is Balamuthia mandrillaris, a pathogenic soil amoeba found in soil. The description of the painless brown skin lesion of the knee in 12-year-old girl and the face lesion in 5-year-old boy, coupled with cognitive disorders and encephalopathy from lesions in the brain, is why I suspect this possible disease. This is considered an emerging disease and is known to occur in South America. A Thai Review article case report I saw indicates that it is a pretty rare disease, and he gives us that. I don't know how rare it actually is if Daniel encountered 2 similar cases in Peru. As the above case and review article indicates, this pathogenic amoeba gains entrance into the body through skin abrasion or through inhalation of oral ingestion. It is lethal if left untreated. The Thai case report review lists a 2010 case where patients from Peru were treated with itraconazole plus albendazole for 14 months. Other cases described in the review article indicate that it is a really nasty disease that requires surgical incision of lesions plus antiparasitic medication. Korean case reports and review conclude their case report with suggestion of macrolides such as clothrol plus azole. Their patient, a previously healthy 4-year-old child, had a terrible outcome. Disease may not be easily diagnosed because it had an indolent course. Hope this terrible guess is not what these patients have, and I am entirely wrong. I kind of ruled out visceral leishmaniasis because of what I understand. It would be kind of rare for encephalopathy to develop.
That's true.
Mark, and then he has a PS. It is difficult to distinguish acanthamoeba from Balamuthia. The 2 species are morphologically indistinguishable. Diagnosis is more easily confirmed by PCR, although immunohistochemistry or immunofluorescence are available at very specialized centers such as the CDC. Encephalitis caused by both is similar.
Right.
And I will say, yeah, one of the tough things, and maybe this came up in our discussion, is that there's a lot of stuff that goes on that doesn't necessarily get reported because it doesn't occur in a place where you have the diagnostic facilities to really get at it. Yeah. And so I don't think this is a particularly common, but they have now a number of these Balamuthia cases characterized at the Peruvian Cayetano Heredia Institute. And actually, in the small world of mind, Eduardo Guttuso, who actually published on this, he was in India with me.
Get out of here.
Yeah, so small world.
Can you take Nicholas's, Dickson?
Yeah, I would love to.
Are you able?
Nicholas writes, TWiP or tweet, my fellow ghouls and goblins. As cerebral involvement was preceded in both cases by cutaneous lesions in association with a clinical history of epidermal compromise, scratches and scrapes, I believe the most likely etiological agent for these cases is Bellmuthia mandrillaris, which is one of the many free-living amoebae readily identified in soil. In rare instances, the organism causes multisystemic disease, originating in either the skin or lower respiratory tract with subsequent hematogenous dissemination to the central nervous system. This condition has been documented in both immunocompetent and immunocompromised humans and multiple animal species. In fact, this condition was first documented in a mandrill housed by the San Diego Zoo in 1986. This is one of several amoebae species that have been indicated as an etiologic agent of amoebic encephalitis, with additional agents including Acanthamoeba species Naegleria fowleri, Paravalcampia francinae, and Saponinia diploidea. Although the cutaneous involvement preceding neurologic manifestations is unique to B. mandrillaris. Although amoebae looks similar histologically, a few salient features utilized by pathologists include lack of tissue cysts with Naegleria fowleri and rare binucleation for B. mandrillaris. A definitive diagnosis can be made through multiple ancillary tests, including multiplex qPCR targeting the 18S RNA gene, immunohistochemistry, and immunofluorescent antibody tests. Because these cases are so rare, these ancillary tests are not routinely offered through most diagnostic laboratories, but are offered through the CDC's Free Living Amoebae Laboratory. I had the fortunate opportunity of diagnosing the first case of B. mandrillaris in an Indian flying fox this past year, soon to be published in the Journal of Veterinary Diagnostic Investigation, which has further expanded host susceptibility to the order Chiroptera for B. mandrillaris. I have attached a gross image for the aforementioned flying fox case, which is characterized by malacia and hemorrhage emanating from the mesencephalic aqueduct in the midbrain. Additionally, I've attached an image of the fluorescent assay performed in this case utilizing antibodies specifically for B. mandrillaris, displaying strong apple-green positive labeling of amoeba trophozoites. I would like to make a point that when a pathologist utilizes the term gross, they are communicating what they were able to discern with the naked eye and not referring to an unattractive state of the lesions, which are, in fact, always beautiful through the eyes of a pathologist. Happy Halloween, and again, thank you always for an entertaining and informative podcast.
Sounds like he's a pathologist.
It sure does.
I put the links to the two pictures there. You could take a look at them.
Great.
One is nice green fluorescence, brain section. And then you should have them, Dr. Despommier. And the others are sections of the brain tissue of the flying fox, I guess.
Yes.
With lesions caused by those amoebae.
Yeah.
Quite beautiful.
Huh.
Don't you think,
in their
Dickson?
own way.
What do you think, Daniel? Can you see them?
I brought him up so Dickson can enjoy that. I actually love, isn't that great? It's beautiful.
I love stuff like this, too, because obviously I had a long history in the laboratory, and I spent so much time looking through the microscope. I had a wonderful time.
Go back.
You're done?
Go back.
You're done? You don't want to go back?
Go back.
So Joshua writes, is it my turn?
That's right.
Yeah,
Hello, doctors. I want to let you know that I love the show. I've been listening since I started pharmacy school in 2012, and I'll be listening after I graduate this spring. I also wanted to let you know that I'm married to a very intelligent woman with a master's in fine arts.
Oh, nice.
She teaches dance, both modern and ballet, and she's extremely knowledgeable in her field. I, however, am just a lowly pharmacist in training. Typically, we have a pretty efficient division of labor at our house where I answer the medicine questions and she answers everything else.
That sounds fair to me.
Here's where it has gotten tense. For some reasons, I seem to remember an episode of TWiP where a parasite was mentioned that only infects humans. My wife believes very strongly that there's no such thing.
Really?
And after failing to impress her with my knowledge of dracunculus, apparently it infects dogs too, I've lost all credibility.
Oh, dear.
Help me, doctors. You are my only hope.
Yeah.
Is that a Star Wars quote?
Yeah,
A little bit.
It certainly is.
Is there such a beast that only preys upon humans? Or for every boy with a worm, is there a dog on the worms menu as well? My marriage hangs in the balance.
We can help you on this one, though. Come on. Joshua, there's a long list of things that only infect human beings. We begin with Enterobius vermicularis.
Wow.
The most common distributed nematode infection in the world, and it infects only people. 0 animals, no
Right.
people.
So
take another one.
So Joshua, your wife is right, and that is the secret to a happy marriage.
You're right. In fact,
So,
you should
so don't you listen to Dickson.
tell her not to listen to this show.
You turn
whatever
to
you
your
do.
you turn to your very intelligent wife, and you say,
Yes,
I am
dear.
so
Yes,
glad that I
dear.
married you. And yes, how embarrassing that I
That's
thought
right.
drunculus
That's right.
did not infect dogs.
Exactly.
What other one?
Well, there's a Tinea saginata.
Right.
It only infects people.
Okay. Very good.
And, well, the larval stage, of course, infects the cow, but there's Ascaris lumbricoides, and that infects pigs as well, but not often. And in fact, Ancylostoma, duodenale, and Decatur americanus,
Duodenale.
they do not infect other animals, just humans.
That's cool, Dickson.
Yeah, and
I
strongyloides.
think we have mentioned this on
Strongyloides, on the other hand, is all over the place.
Yeah.
So,
But
They vary greatly.
Joshua,
Joshua,
You know
your
it's good
wife
for
is
you.
right.
listen, nod yes and move on.
Yes.
but you can rest. You can, inside of you, you can have this knowledge.
Yes. That's the
But,
best place for this knowledge to stay, Joshua.
That's right. That's right.
But for everyone else, yeah, there's plenty of them. The next one is from Evie. I really like this one. Dear Doctor, and Doctor, firstly, I want to thank you for your work here on the show and in life. You three are amazing. About the show, you don't know how many hours I've spent with you guys crammed into my ears, oftentimes on long tour bus rides, which leads me into this scabies story. A few years back, I was in a touring cabaret. We were performing in Italy at a gorgeous venue in a lovely town for a prestigious event. About 3 days into our stay, red dots started to appear between the fingers and up the hands of 4 of our troupe members. One kept saying the mosquitoes here are terrible and scratching and scratching.
Oh, my goodness.
I didn't pay much attention as I was unaffected, and this was a group prone to complaining. But every night at the end of our show, we would clasp hands and take the final bows.
Oh, my.
I begrudgingly participated even during the outbreak. In the end, I was not infected.
Lucky.
The affected folks were convinced that the spread was due to unwashed bedclothes or towels in our hotel. However, I was not. Scabies have an incubation time, right? The immediate reactions the others would have had would mean that they had contracted the parasite elsewhere, right? Later, when we were all back at home, one of the members admitted that they had been exposed weeks before in New York. This explained why those of us who didn't make the New York stop were free of the scabies. As a person with a biology clinical laboratory background, traveling was always scary. Eating food that had been sitting out and having no control over how it was prepared, loading all of your belongings on top of other people's belongings, and then the close proximity we all had with one another for hours and hours daily. Icky. I basically lived off of bread and wine, for safety's sake.
You must have muffed a few lines, though, during the play, no?
After this scare, I started leaving my bags in the car and parking atop a parking structure, letting the bugs bake to death in the California sunshine, just in case there were any stowaways. I have a bedbug story and an E. coli story, too. Hooray for showbiz. Much love to you three. Thank you again for all that you do. I really think that's cool. And do send us your you could spread them out. Send us the bedbug story and your E. coli story as well.
Would you say that the insect stories that he has is mostly about showbuzz?
Ooh.
Showbugs.
Alan
Showbuzz.
Showbuzz.
Alan Dove. Can you take...
Alan Dove? He's not here.
We only have 2 more, so you can take the next one, Dickson.
Irwan writes, Dear Dickson, Vincent, and Daniel, it's great to finally be writing to my favorite podcasters. I really enjoyed your discussion on TWiP 97 about natural antibodies against alpha-gal mediating protection against malaria, but I have to correct you on one spot. In that episode, Dickson and Daniel both insist that mosquitoes inject sporozoites directly into the capillaries of their victims. Meanwhile, Vincent, in vain, no pun intended, tries to argue that the sporozoites are injected intradermally. Well, Vincent is right. How can that be? It's been known for a long time that when mosquitoes take a blood meal, they begin by probing the skin and inject sporozoites from their salivary glands into the dermis. The sporozoites then migrate through the dermis to capillaries, where the circulation of the blood takes them to the liver. Here's a wonderful paper where you can see the videos of the mosquitoes probing and releasing sporozoites. It's a sight to behold. And then he gives a reference to that video. I'm working on a Vivax malaria vaccine at the Jenner Institute in Oxford and listen to your podcasts while checking blood smears of malaria-infected mice. So, multitasking, that's very good. Sean Elias, a postdoc at the Jenner, has just started a podcast series about the work the Institute does. So if people want to learn more about vaccines against malaria and other diseases, they could listen to these. And then he gives a reference to the podcasts. What a famous institute that is, right? I can't end without mentioning my two favorite charities, the Schistosomiasis Control Initiative and the Against Malaria Foundation. They are both charities that focus on parasitic infections. Funding, deworming, and distributing bed nets are the most cost-effective health interventions out there, according to charity evaluators, giving what we can and give well. So it's a shame that more people don't know about them. And then he gives references to all those organizations. And then finally concludes, anyway, thanks for producing such great podcasts and keep up the good work. Yours, Erwin.
So this is
So what do you think, Dickson?
Well, I'm stubborn enough to still hold to my old tenets. I really do believe, since I was associated with Dr. Robert Quads for many, many years as a colleague, and I still talk to him occasionally, that he was very convincing when he described how the parasites gain entrance into the blood, because I agree that the mosquito does probe, but it's heat-seeking. It's actually looking for the warmth of the capillary, and then once it finds it, bam, it inserts it. And then, in doing so, I understand that some of the sporozoites could escape prior to that because they're injecting all of these things from their salivary glands to modify the tissues, to allow the capillary to expand, to anesthetize the area, to make the blood not coagulate as it's sucking it up. All these agents are released, and I can't imagine that the sporozoites aren't also. But it's hard for me to also imagine how the sporozoites would by themselves migrate through the tissues because they don't have any locomotion. They don't have any. They're apicomplexans. They don't have any way of moving. So how do they?
It's called Brownian motion.
Brownian?
Brownian?
Random movement. Things randomly move.
I was gonna try to go with like everyone's correct here, but I'm not sure I'm gonna be able to do that. No, I mean so I think what he describes is true. There is a probing that occurs.
Of course.
And so, it's not like they just go pung right into the vessel. There's a probing and then the capillary. But my understanding, and sort of pulling this number from memory, is that a large number of the sporozoites are introduced before they finally hit the capillary. When they hit the capillary, only sort of the remaining 25% goes directly into the blood. So there is about 75% that gets...
Okay.
So I sort of think everybody was right here.
So this is actually a research paper, that he cites here.
Right.
The abstract says, previous studies have shown that mosquitoes inject Plasmodium sporozoites into avascular portions of the skin rather than directly into the blood circulation. Then over time, these move into the circulation, blah, blah, blah. So they show by intravital microscopy the direct evidence that mosquito probing introduces sporozoites into avascular tissue. I am not one to argue with a scientific paper unless it's wrong. Of
it's
course.
not a belief system. Science is not a belief system.
I wanted to say that.
So I agree with you.
You said I believe.
Yeah, believe. It's a belief. It's a belief. Yeah. From what I was told, that's the point. So maybe I'll have to revise because of what I've learned.
Well, you should watch the video.
I should watch.
Go to the videotape.
I will do that.
And by the way, this podcast, it's a one-off episode about the vaccines. One of the participants is Linda Coughlin, who's a virologist that I met when I was in Glasgow. She actually invited me there.
Nice.
So thanks for telling me about this, Linda. It's okay. No problem. We have one more.
We did.
Daniel.
So Jeffrey writes, doctors, I believe that it was Dr. Despommier who asked the question, how does the single eosinophil which enters a body through the GI tract find its way to a single eosinophil, love, and progeny in lung tissue?
Stop there. It's not eosinophil. How does a single... So you're talking about parasites where the male and female have to find
Was it schistosomes maybe? Maybe it was schistosomes he's talking about?
Yeah.
How do schistosomes find each other in the tall grass?
They find each other delightful.
Is this what it was? Is this what we're doing? I think it was.
It's not an eosinophil. It's a parasite,
Yeah.
but I don't remember which one it was, Dickson.
It says progeny in the lung tissue. No, that's Paragonimus. No, I was talking about Paragonimus.
Right, not eosinophil.
Okay, so that makes sense. So
he's using
the lung
eosinophil.
fluke.
Right.
So we're talking here about the lung fluke, I believe. So I'm going to read it with that inserted in. How does the single, say, Paragonimus,
Right.
which enters a body through the GI tract, find its way to a single Paragonimus, love, and progeny in lung tissue?
Right.
He brought up issues of tracking down that Paragonimus across many tissues and chemical gradients, which were all appropriate, but I think that he pondered the question in the wrong order. If I may be so nitpicky, even if that involves a different parasite, rather ask what chemical trails the Paragonimus followed to end up in the same organ, if indeed it did.
Right.
Then what trails it follows to find a partner.
Sure.
It may be that the parasite's sole goal is finding its mate, but I suspect that its programming to find an appropriate growth environment, i.e. the organ, is the primary programming. After all, what good does reproduction do if the parasite ends up in a hostile environment?
Oh.
Well, you know, the body itself is an enormously hostile environment for parasites to begin with. So that's, you know, I would argue that every parasite has that as a problem to overcome.
I was wondering after the last couple emails if Dickson felt like he was in a hostile environment.
No, I've never felt that way. Never felt. I think they're referring to either schistosomes, which don't give off progeny in the lungs, or Paragonimus, but because you've only got two worms in this case.
Yeah, exactly. That was how to find each other.
Yeah, so there are chemical trails that these parasites do give off, which attract the other one to it. But remember, Paragonimus doesn't always end up in the lungs. There are lots of atypical Paragonimus infections. You could have a pair of worms at the tip of your finger, for instance. You can have them in your brain tissue. They still find each other. So it's not the lung tissue that's attracting the parasites. It's the parasite that's attracting the other parasite.
Yeah. Unfortunately, with the Kellicoti cases, right, out of the Missouri, sort of our American Paragonimus species, the brain is not really so abnormal. It's actually quite common.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Problem.
But the other thing that's remarkable about that, then, it's got to be an aberrant site because the eggs have no way of escaping then. So these parasites make mistakes all the time, and they don't all succeed, obviously.
But his point is that food is what's tracking them or leading them, and then it's reproduction.
Yeah.
But
I think
in countering that, I would like to just mention that how many humans to pursue reproduction have ended up in hostile environments.
That was actually what went through my head.
But I'm bummed. And on that sour note,
he does say, thanks again for another interesting episode. It doesn't hurt that romance and parasitism are usually good for attracting an audience.
That's a great title, Romance and Parasitism.
That is a good title.
bingo.
It's another one. I don't know if
We
it's
have a lot of
one
good titles.
for
I don't know
this.
if it's for this one, but
We'll have to keep it. Romance and Parasitism. Next time we talk about worms finding each other.
I think that's a great title for a book.
Romance and Parasitism.
Absolutely.
Why don't you write it?
You should write that.
Absolutely.
You could read a chapter here on TWiP.
I think you'd have to bleep every other word.
TWiP here is at iTunes if you want to subscribe, which is free. We're also at microbeworld.org/TWiP. And soon it will be at Microbe TV. And I'll give you the URL when it's live, but it's not quite there yet. And if you have any questions or comments, we love hearing your stories, your scabies stories, and so forth.
Absolutely.
Send them to twip@twiv.tv. That will change also, so it makes more sense. I know some of you are confused, and you send them to twiv@twiv.tv. We're going to make it all happy for everybody else. But we are back. We don't know when we're going to next do a TWiP, because it's 100 next, and we want to do a special one, but we don't know if people will be here, right?
Some intriguing leads to this.
We have a special place we might do it,
We
but
do.
Dixon's going away for like 3 months, right?
No, 2 weeks. Just 2 weeks. Just the 15th through the 30th
We
of
would
December.
basically either have to do it before the 15th, or it wouldn't be till next year.
Right.
So we'll see. We could release episode 99.5. That would be not fair, though.
That wouldn't be fair.
It would still be 100.
Yeah, that's
All
right.
right, so stay tuned. Be patient if you don't hear from us right away. Daniel Griffin, you can find him. Just come to Columbia University Medical Center. and you'll find him wandering the hallways. Thank you,
Particularly
Daniel.
if you have an infection.
That's right.
Thank you,
An
Daniel.
unusual infection.
Oh, thank you. Pleasure as always.
Welcome back. Dickson Despommier is at trichinella.org, medicalecology.com, and verticalfarm.com, the pater of vertical farming.
Yeah.
In the absence of a madre.
Yeah,
Thank you, Dickson.
You're welcome, Vincent. You're quite welcome.
I'm happy to be doing TWiP again. It's been a long time.
Yes, it has.
It's been over a month.
Yeah.
Now, I hope that our listeners enjoyed this one. I certainly enjoyed it. You know, I am Vincent Racaniello, by the way, and you can find me at the blog mentioned earlier by Daniel, virology.ws, which is a lot of fun to do also. And the music that you hear on TWiP is composed and performed by Ronald Jenkins. You can find his work at ronaldjenkins.com. By the way, if you like TWiP, you should try TWiV and TWIM and our upcoming This Week in Evolution, TWevo, Urban Agriculture. You'll be able to find all of them. What's the matter, Dickson?
No, I just like the way that sounds.
You can find all of them at Microbe TV when the site goes live, but it's not there yet. And, of course, we use Ronald Jenkins' music with his permission, and he loves it. You've been listening to This Week in Parasitism. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon. Another TWiP
is parasitic.